Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I am very excited to have with me as my guest, Vanessa Judelman. And let me tell you about Vanessa. She is the president of Mosaic People Development. For over 20 years, she's been helping clients develop leaders who inspire great results. She is also a speaker, facilitator, leadership consultant, and certified executive coach. Having worked in the trenches herself as a leader, she teaches her clients very practical approach to leadership that she has used to develop her own high-performing teams. Over the years, she has trained and coached thousands of people to transition from doers to leaders. She works with leaders to give them the tools and strategies they need to feel confident, be more self-aware, be team-focused, and be strategic. She authored a book about leadership, Mastering Leadership, What It Takes to Lead in Today's Fast-Paced World. And she has led her own teams. Vanessa has been privileged to develop leaders in organizations such as Campbell's Soups, the United Nations, HelloFresh, Sick Kids, and the Bank of Montreal. Today, we're going to center our focus on leadership, and the episode title is The Leadership Revolution, Thriving in the New World of Work. So please join me in welcoming my guest, Vanessa Judelman. Vanessa, so excited to chat with you today about this topic. As I said before we got started, this is something that I love to teach on and to talk about. And I think it's really good to bring it to the forefront because the last several years has changed the way we work. And that means it has to change the way we lead. And so it's a great topic to talk about.
It sure is, Vicki, and thanks for inviting me. I look forward to our conversation today.
We always start with two easy questions, and the first is to tell everybody, where do you live? Where do you call home right now?
So I live in Toronto, Canada.
Awesome. I love Toronto. What is, I guess we talk about, what you've done a little bit, highlights of your journey, but I'd love for you always to go a little bit deeper and talk about, how your journey has changed, pivoted to do what you do today. Where were some of the aha moments, those pivotal moments that really said, this is what I'm meant to do. This is my new mission and passion.
For sure. So when I went to university, I was an English major. And I always thought it was incredible to be an English major because I got a degree to read books. I thought, why doesn't everybody do this?
I know.
And then my mother, who was a teacher, said, what are you going to do with your life as an English major? So go into education. So I said, okay. So I actually did a degree in education after that. I was teaching at-risk youth for a while. And after getting a few too many binders thrown at my head and chairs thrown at me, I thought, maybe a shift to the corporate world might be in store for me. So I started working at a training and consulting firm. And it was a really nice shift for me, Vicki, because I was still in education.
Yeah, still
working
training.
with adults instead of kids. So that's really where I learned everything I know now about being a consultant and running my own business and working with clients. And then I thought after being in consulting for over a decade, it's time to move in-house. And that's where I
Mm.
built a team. I built a department from scratch. I hired people. I built a team. I had people on that team who loved my leadership style. I had people on that team who didn't like my leadership style, to be really honest. And it was from those people that I learned the most about
Yeah.
what it takes to be a leader. And so when I say I've been in the trenches, I really have.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Uh, Whenever I was younger, I thought I would be a teacher as well. And I came from a very large family, the second, so I couldn't afford college. So I went right into secretarial work. I paid for myself to go to business school. And it just seemed like throughout my career, though, God kept on pushing me to teaching people different things. And now I teach and coach and things. But one of the best parts of what I did for most of my career was project lead. And in all of those opportunities, anytime I had to be able to teach people, either mentor them on leadership and conflict resolution or whatever it would be, I kind of really steered, and that's where I got the most joy. And so it's interesting how there there are ways to get what is fulfilling to you without having to have binders thrown at you.
Exactly.
Oh, so the second piece, or really the second portion of this interview, is really to talk about what you do today and how you might help the audience. So, why leadership retention is just so difficult at times? It's critical to business and to HR, but why is it so important that we get it right?
Well, I'll tell you another pivotal story from my past that explains why it's important to get it right. When I was on my second maternity leave, a new leader came into the organization and changed everything while I was on maternity leave. So I came back
Awesome.
completely different world. And prior to my maternity leave, I had an incredible leader for 5 years. She was just smart and savvy and really goal oriented, but incredibly supportive. And this new leader was the opposite. She was a micromanager. She was a control freak. She really made my life quite miserable. She would yell at me in front of people. And so I moved from being a high performing individual in my organization to somebody who was quietly quitting. I really actually, to be honest, became quite depressed in that role.
Hmm.
And I never had a leader like that who made my life so miserable. And so that's why the work that I do is so important to me because I've experienced, and Vicki, it's interesting when I do leadership training, I often say to people, how many of you have explained my situations?
Really?
How many of you have had similar situations? Exactly. And 90% of the people in the room put their
Yeah.
hand,
So sad.
right?
Yes.
And so it's just leaders make or break people's experience at work. And
Hmm.
that's why this work matters because there's so many leaders that are unconscious of how their behavior impacts people. And so one of my goals is to turn those unconscious leaders into conscious leaders.
Yeah. It's really so true. I know that in my 4 decades of being exposed to different kinds of leaders, there were some that, just as you said, were so impactful and really mentors to you. And there were others that every day it was a lesson to me. I mean, I was learning from these people, but it was like, I will never do that. I will never treat people that way. And as you said, it just, to survive, you do become just silent. And all of those great ideas and innovation and all of that creativity that would have made a difference in that team and that organization are shut down because you are just trying to get through the day.
Yeah, for sure. And you have to have trust with your leaders. When I work with leaders, one of the first things I do is teach them how to build high trust in their team because trust is the foundation of every high performing team. And
Mm.
leaders don't know how to build it. They don't even know what trust is. And I actually really like the work of Stephen M. R. Covey. He's written a great book. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, called The Speed of Trust.
Mm.
And he breaks trust down into two components: character and competence.
Yeah.
So I love that concept because it's not just your character. I mean, character is about being respectful and loyal and transparent. It's also your competence, which is getting results and clarifying your expectations with people and getting better and learning as a leader and being accountable. And
Mm.
so you can't have a leader who's high on the character side but doesn't deliver. And the opposite side, what I most often see, Vicki, are those leaders who are really high on the competence side. They drive for results, but they're lower on the character side. They're
Yeah.
not respectful or they're not loyal.
Yeah.
And so you need to have both.
Absolutely. I always say that I hired for character because I could teach skills, but I
Exactly.
can't change character.
It's very hard to teach character.
Yeah. I mean, even I think one of the early lessons that I had whenever the last job I was in for a very long time, we were talking about changing the culture, and that it's like turning a ship in the ocean. It takes 5 to 7 years to change a culture. And it's the same with a character, but even harder, I think, because if the individual that has character flaws, if you will, or opportunities for greatness, but doesn't recognize that, doesn't feel a desire, a need to change, then it won't happen.
It's so true. When I work with, as an executive coach, when I work with leaders, especially executives, many of them have never had any kind of leadership training or support in their
I
whole
know, so
career.
sad. Yes.
So sad, right? And so I always say it's choice plus hard work. You have to choose to change, and then you have to work hard at it.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because um in some situations, I don't know if you in your companies you experience this, but we always had these yearly survey of our employees, the C employee engagement surveys type of thing. And so whenever there were low ratings and they were all directly related to the management, not the leadership, but the management of how they led, they all of a sudden that those individuals would start walking around and doing things, asking if how were you doing and things. And it was so insincere. And it was the timing of it just really made it seem as if they were just doing this to move a number and not really that they cared. And so whenever I work with young people, it's like you need to make sure that if you get into any position, any job, no matter what level, that the team that you work with knows always that you care. That
Yeah.
they,
In fact, I had a client recently go through that exact situation. His ratings were low on the employee opinion survey. And he called me and he said, "Okay, Vanessa, you're coming with me across the country." And we created the strategy where he stood up. He wanted to build trust with his team. He said, "Okay, I'm going to be fully transparent." That's one of the key trust building behaviors under that character side of building trust. He said, I know I'm going to be transparent. He stood up in front of the whole, like different, his leadership team and then their direct reports. We did 5 sessions. He stood up in front of everyone and said, "I'm owning this and I want to be fully transparent. You've given me feedback and I'm here to listen." And he sat in every session. He took notes. He took feedback. I was blown away, to be honest, how
Mhm.
accountable he was. So that's the opposite of what you just mentioned. He really cared so much about supporting his team. And what explained to everybody is sort of the bigger context of why he was pushing them so hard, in that he was getting a lot of pressure from head office in Europe. And he just didn't share with his team. He wanted to hide the
Oh
pressure.
yeah, because he knows everything. He's perfect, right?
Yeah, and it was worse. And so what I shared with him is actually be more vulnerable, be more transparent.
Absolutely.
That's how you're going to build trust with your team.
Yeah, absolutely. So You talk about the 4 C's of leadership retention. Would you share with us what those are?
Sure. So the first thing you have to be is curious,
Yeah.
right? So I do a lot of coaching with leaders. And what I find is, and I teach them how to coach. And most leaders, they often I find come from a place of judgment. My team's not performing well, and they have issues with their work style. And I say, okay, let's turn that around from judgment to curiosity. And so curiosity is all about what's possible, how to overcome issues, which
Yeah.
leads to the next C, which is coaching. Okay. So once you have that curiosity, then you can be a good coach. Coaching is all about asking questions.
Yeah.
My favorite questions that I teach all of my clients, and I'm a certified coach. So this is what I learned when I learned to be a coach was are asking what questions. So those are those super open-ended questions. So I
Mm-hmm.
was actually talking to a client yesterday, for example, and she runs a communications team, and someone on her team wanted to get something done by the end of the year. And she said, Vanessa, that's ridiculous. And I'm meeting with him next. And how can he expect it's December, the holidays are coming up. How can he expect to have that done by the end of the year? And I said to him, instead of going into the meeting with that tone, let's go in with a curious tone. And so we created some what questions that she could ask him so he could come to the conclusion that the timing is a bit too tight on his own.
Mm-hmm. Or he could surprise her and have actually an action plan that you never know. People will surprise you. But yeah,
Yeah,
but I think what you just said is important. That's why I teach leadership and public speaking or speaking coach, because tone is all about it, and having not only the what and the why, but creating stories around it that the people will remember the what and the why.
exactly.
What do you feel are the 3 common barriers for women in the workplace? And I'm just limited to 3. We could
For
probably
women.
have a show.
Mhm. So I definitely think women are overly loyal. And I've seen this a lot over the years because I had a client who stayed in a position supporting the executive for so long, and she wanted to move into a management role. But the executive she was supporting kept saying to her, oh, you're the best. What would I do without you? You're amazing. I could never manage without you. And so she stayed in that role for 10 years and saw all the new people coming in behind her and moving up and moving up and moving up and moving up. And eventually, 10 years later, she said, why am I being so loyal to this person that
Yeah.
I'm holding back my own career? So that's one. The
Mm.
second one is that women don't often speak up. I
Yeah.
often see men speaking up all the time. They share their opinion, they share their perspective. And so I coach a lot of women, speak up,
Yeah.
right? Share your perspective, share your opinion. And then the third thing that hold women back is they don't advocate for themselves.
Yeah.
So I have a client who is an executive. She has 7 direct reports, and she just found out that one of her direct reports, is making more money than she is. This person has no direct reports, is an individual contributor. And so that was the conversation I had with her yesterday is what does it look like for you to advocate for yourself? Because
Yeah.
no one's going to advocate for you. You
That's
have
exactly right. And it's really, I think, kind of ties back to the 4 C's too, for women, uh, to be confident enough to be curious, ask those questions. Really, and I love that you talked about not speaking up. I was that person that sat in the back of the room, or even sometimes in the front of the room, but I let everybody else say what was on my mind, and then felt frustrated that, oh my gosh, I was just thinking that. Why didn't I say that? It wasn't until I was in my 50s and I thought, you know what? I'm not even going to worry about breaking the ceiling or doing anything. doing leadership, I'm doing fine. I'm just going to be happy. And when I stopped trying and and really, I guess in a way, stopped caring about what other people thought, that's when I excelled. And I think so much women do worry about trying to be something that they're not, as opposed to being authentically who they are and really shining as that person.
That's a great point. That's actually one of the myths. I write a blog every Friday, posted on my website, and I just did a series on some of the misconceptions of leadership. And one of them was it's okay to emulate someone else's leadership style. No, it's not. It's a
Be
misconception
yours.
because we're all wired so differently. And I have a client, for example, who's a CEO of an organization whose background is actuary science. He's an actuary scientist. And he said to me, Vanessa, I know that I should be like walking the halls and engaging with people, but it just feels so inauthentic. And I said to him, who says you have to do that? He said, well, the CEO before me did that. And I said, well, why do you have to do that? And I said to him, what's your goal? He said, well, my goal is to connect with people. I said, okay, so you're an introvert. Walking the halls does not feel authentic for you. What is a way that you can connect with people as a CEO that feels authentic? And so we came up with this idea of him having these coffee talks with people and meeting
Mhm.
small groups of people and connecting with them in that way. And that felt authentic to him.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. One of the founders of UPS, which the company that he used to work with, Jim Casey, he used to carry 3x5s in his suit pocket. And as he walked around the operations and he met somebody, he would chat with them about how they were doing and everything. And then after he walked away, he wrote down things about them. And then later on, as he was passing the halls, a year later or whatever, he'd say, hey, Joe, how are you doing? How's your dog or your kid or something? And that little teeny thing was probably better than a gold watch because the owner, the founder of the company remembered them enough. And I think we put too much pressure on ourselves to do something remarkable when, just as you said, sitting down and letting your folks just share their thoughts and their opinions, that and listening to them enough to respond, knowing that you understood what they were saying, I think is really far more important.
Actually, that you hit on a great point around listening. When I teach coaching to leaders, we do this exercise because listening is such a foundational part of coaching.
Yeah.
And so we do this exercise where I put 1 minute on the clock and I say, okay, sit with a partner, and your partner's going to talk about a business issue for 60 seconds. And your job is to listen without interrupting for 60 seconds. So 60 seconds goes by, I stop the clock and I say to everybody, how was that? And most people say, that was so hard. I wanted to interrupt. I wanted to ask a question. And I remind them that was only 60 seconds. So listening is like a muscle that leaders
Yeah.
have to build. And I think it's so common for them to be putting out fires all the time that they're not trained to listen. And if that's one skill that I really recommend leaders learn and really practice. And some leaders have flexed that muscle before. Some leaders are really good at listening. I would say 75% are not. And so, I would definitely recommend leaders add that to their development plan, because when you really stop and pause and listen to people's tone and listen to their body language, you notice so much more about a person's situation, their issues, their problems. And even something like noticing when you delegate something, listen to someone's reaction. If you delegate
Mhm.
something and someone says, oh, for sure, yeah, absolutely, I can get that to you by Friday at noon, they're aligned. If they say, okay, I always notice the hesitation, and I might say
Mhm.
something like, wait a minute, I noticed you hesitated. What's that okay about? And then
Yeah.
I say, well, actually, the CEO just came to me and loaded me with this, and it's also due on Friday. And so can we renegotiate timelines? But if you're not listening really
Yeah.
carefully, you're not going to pick up on those nuances in your conversation.
And the other side of that is what we were talking about earlier. By you pausing and allowing them to say that they have all these other responsibilities, then that's going to build that relationship and that trust and that safety zone, if you will, that says, okay, I am comfortable enough to tell my superior or my manager or whomever that I don't think that I can do this, and know that it's okay. I think sometimes, again, we think we have to be perfect or we're superhuman, or we're going to lose our job. And that's not the case, you know.
That's true. And I think that's actually another important part of being a coach, a leader as coach. One of the things a lot of leaders don't realize is there's actually two different kinds of coaching. There's formal coaching and informal coaching.
Yeah.
And I think it's great formal coaching. Sit down with your team Monday morning and have a quick 20-minute conversation just to say, what are your goals this week? What are you doing to move your goals forward this week? What help or support do you need from me? Because that quick check-in, that formal coaching meeting is such a great way to make sure people are prioritizing, make sure they're not overloaded, and to help them reprioritize and move their goals forward. Because I think people spend way too much time talking about in meetings what happened in the past. Like the past is done. Let's just focus on moving stuff forward for this week.
Yeah. For me, it's just, what did you learn from what happened in the past that we can make sure we don't repeat if it wasn't successful? And if it was, redo, make sure we do that again. How can we use your 5 tangible strategies that move people from doers to leaders? And I love that, from the doers to leaders, because a lot of people go from being a doer, operational or and to management as a leader, and they're still have that doer mentality.
Oh, for sure. For sure. So you have to move from a doer to a leader. You have to have self-awareness. You have to understand your strengths, your weaknesses. You have to have a growth mindset. You have to know that you're going to make mistakes. And to your last comment, you have to be able to reflect on your mistakes and learn from them.
Yeah.
You definitely have to learn how to coach. We've talked about that a lot today. You have to know what your priorities are, which we touched on briefly. And, there's a great book called The Leadership Pipeline, which it's been around a long time, which actually talks about the fact there's 5 levels of leadership, right? Level 1 is yourself and being an individual contributor. You're still a leader, right? Level 2 is when you move into leadership for the first time. That's when you move from a doer to a leader. And for the first time in your career, you now have to manage your own objectives and also get results through others. And then it moves all the way up to leading other managers, leading an enterprise, leading an organization, right? And you also have to be able to manage change and conflict, right? So your team will never become high performing if you can't manage conflict.
Yeah.
Because you will never, you have to move through the conflict to have a high performing team. And then when it comes to leading and communicating change is everywhere.
Yeah.
The only constant we have, as we know these days, is change. And so again, that's something I teach leaders all the time: how to move through change, how to communicate change, understanding the barriers to change. 70% of change initiatives fail. And so I don't want anyone that I'm working with to be in that 70%. I want you to be in that 30% of leaders who knows how to move change forward. So that's really a key part of moving from a doer to a leader.
And a key thing you talked about there was the communication piece. I just had a meeting yesterday, and that's what I was talking about. There's big changes coming over the next year, and how well you communicate that in the right tone will be impactful as to whether or not that change is accepted.
And also repeating the message a lot.
Yeah.
So they used to say, you have to tell somebody 6 or 7 times, right, a message in order for it to sink in. Now, Vicki, I've heard it's 10 times.
Yeah.
Because we're in virtual first environments. People are sending so many emails. We're all on communication overload. So one of the things I teach leaders how to do is create a communication strategy with 10 touch points to make sure that you're communicating your message at least 10 times.
Yeah. Awesome. time has flown by. You and I could chat probably for days on this
I think
subject,
so.
but it is time now for me to share my slide. For those that are just listening, you know the drill. You should have gotten a pen and paper from the very beginning to take notes from this obvious, awesome conversation. But if you haven't, go grab that right now. Everything will be on my YouTube channel, Vicki Noethling. So please do subscribe, as well as my findyourleadershipconfidence.com website. The website is mosaicpd.com, and that's mosaicpd.com. Facebook is Mosaic People Development with initial capped. LinkedIn and Instagram is her name, Vanessa Judelman. That's VANESSAJUDELMAN. I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa now to talk about her call to action for today.
Wonderful. Thanks, Vicki. So I would recommend you go to yourleadershipresources.com. And at that URL, you'll find access to my weekly blog, which you're welcome to sign up for, access to my book, information about coaching and some of the programs that I run, and also my contact information if you'd like to reach out to me for any further questions about our conversation today.
Fantastic, Vanessa. Thank you so much for being a fantastic guest today.
Thanks so much for your time. It was lovely chatting with you.
You as well. As always, I remind everyone that life is a journey, and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling, signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.